3 decades into democracy, and freedom is still very much a relative concept in South Africa, and it's just Musa. Welcome back, and thank you so much for clicking back in. And this week's episode is pretty much a glimpse into the pace and ways of my days of late, taking things much more slowly, which allows me to go a bit more in depth with my topics and therefore have more meaningful and richer discussions. And that's exactly what happened as I attended the Silent Wounds conversation hosted by the Youth Organization for Research, Justice and Advocacy. The dialogue was a critical intergenerational approach to transitional justice as we are in the year of reparations with the African Union. What does reparation mean when conflicts or societies have transitioned so far away from the first political transition? What does justice mean for emerging generations, and how do we create responsive systems? The conversation was also an opportunity to reflect on what intergenerational justice means in our own context. And as a South African practitioner, the series of reopened inquests and apartheid-related cases are not only a silent wound for my generation, but it's also a grisly laceration for previous generations, the victims of apartheid, the survivors, the families, as well as the country. Here's what I mean.
My father has been brutally murdered, but the pain is still there. I don't know him. I will never know him. I want to know him. And the way that I know him is not the way that I want to know him. I don't know what his voice sounds like. I don't know what he smells like. I don't know what.
So I was born while my mother still stayed at her household. And my father was a very present father. I have very vivid memories of me being carried between Mikostal and Lingelishe to the Kalata house, my grandparents' house. My father was very warm as a person. He was an empath. He taught me a lot of the things that I know. Because my mom worked at the hospital, he would be there as a teacher because he came out earlier from work.
And those were the testimonies of Dorothy and Dumani Tsalata in the Cradock 4 inquest. And they are the daughters of Fort Tsalata, who was one of the Cradock 4 activists from Eastern Cape in Cradock. Mr. Matthew Goniwe, Mr. Fort Tsalata, Mr. Sicelo Mhlaudi, Mr. Spero Mkhonto on June 27, 1985 were returning to Cradock from a meeting when they were abducted and killed by members of the security branch. The inquest is one of many matters that was forwarded for further investigation and prosecution by the TRC when it closed its operations in the early 2000s. Through critical evidence such as the Pikoli affidavit that was found in the Nukutula Simelane ongoing case, we know that there was a form of political interference that took place which did not allow the cases to take place from 2002 to 2017. And now we are seeing a cascade of cases, apartheid-related cases, coming forth in a democratic South Africa. But what these cases also reveal is that the nature of these crimes also coincide with contemporary South African challenges. In addition to allegations of political interference, the legacy of apartheid lingers on a familial level, on a communal level. It's in the very fabric of our society. So how do we uproot it when justice still has not been served, not just for the families, but also for the systemic nature of the crime of apartheid? And so that's what Silent Conversations is about. Breaking the silence that would allow emerging generations to name the deficits of justice.
But yet they are very deeply felt. Our brothers, for our sisters, how do we acknowledge the emotional, cultural, and psychological dimension of harm? And how can we make space for young people to lead these conversations, not just tokenistic in nature, but as truth holders and agents of change? Today, we are very honored to be joined by an esteemed group of practitioners and experts whose work have shaped the landscape of transitional justice, mental health, and community healing across the continent.
I first of all want to thank Mosa for the activity she's given us. She's actually summarized what I wanted to talk about today, which was very lovely. Thank you. Is and what and the ideal situation. So what is, in this case, we are talking about trauma, reparation, healing, and integrating mental health into every other system. Some tips I can give is, first of all, acknowledging the importance of mental health. You cannot integrate something that you do not believe is helpful or you do not advocate for.
Yeah.
So the
holistic understanding of what trauma and its impacts are on the human life. And that's what our practitioners were huge on in this conversation, especially Caroline. It's not necessarily that impact is in the moment, and sometimes it's not direct. And also it's multidimensional. It could be physical, spiritual, which is an often neglected element in psychology. It's a very Eurocentric understanding of what wellness is. And so it's very important for New Insight to be able to incorporate all these contemporary challenges and elements of what justice is, as the victims have not only changed and grown, but so has justice and its frameworks.
Really, do we hold states accountable for the provision of mental health approaches and interventions beyond just confining it to the health sector, but looking at, because it's a mental health and psychosocial, right? The social bonds are broken. So when you look at policies that are responsible for fixing or reconstructing or rebuilding a country post-conflict, how do we ensure that these policies are grounded in a mental health approach?
Systems. And that's what Gugu was advocating for, that we should move away from individuating this responsibility of mental health and building solely on the individual, as is the current disposition in the Eurocentric understanding of psychology and wellness. We need to understand that in order to create whole and healthy and supported individuals, the system has to step up in that regard. People cannot talk their way out of poverty. People cannot pathologize their way out of climate injustice. What are the systems in place, and are they responsive to the full history of injustice?
We cannot have a conversation around intergenerational justice or intergenerational trauma without young people, because they are the carriers of the pain. And they are also the ones that are interrupting a lot of the times, a lot of these narratives that have been pushed through. And when we're thinking about it, the truth is a lot of this youth are being celebrated for surviving a system that haven't acknowledged the harm that they've inherited. And I think that's something we need to acknowledge. And that's not just justice, it's about the neglect of young people. Too often, they have given a seat at the table to shape an agenda, but without any tools to be able to challenge that agenda that actually pulls them into that space and really says.
Stephen was preaching. In fact, the entire panel was preaching. Thank you to each and every one of our panel members for a beautiful discussion. But that's the thing with silent wounds. We need to understand that all of us live with them. If you live in a post-conflict society, you have a silent wound. It's just a question of acknowledging it or moving with it. And so how does that affect us as emerging generations in this transitional justice space, living in a relatively free society? That is the ongoing question and journey. Thank you so much for joining me on this one. And don't stay silent. Break the silence. I'll see you on the next one.